Okay, in this video, we're going to pick up where we left off. And specifically in the previous video, I was starting to show how to create our own function so we could reduce the amount of repetitive code we had. And the next thing I was going to do in my own code was to write a basic auth type of middleware function. But it turns out there's already one built into ZIO HTTP. So that's what we're going to be looking at is the basic auth middleware function that's already included. In the code you'll see here below, I've created one route that does require basic auth and other routes that do not. And we'll see how that affects our code. And then I have a note here that basic auth is a middleware function. And to me, middleware is a little bit like aspect-oriented programming if you ever use that. And you'll see what that means in terms of real code when we get down there in a little bit. So before we get into the code, we're going to have two routes here. One is called /health. The other one is going to be version right here. And these two routes will not require authentication. And then we're going to have this other route here that is going to work with basic authentication. So we'll see how all of this works here. Okay, so the first section of the code here has two individual public routes. So the first route is just at health, and I use the short form of a handler and just return OK right there. The path of the second route is version, and in this handler I show a little bit of a different syntax. So I'm only showing this syntax right here and then this syntax right here, so you can get more and more comfortable with writing handlers. So those are the two public routes. Then I have a protected route here, and this one is at this path right here. And you can see this portion of the path is a variable. So that's the name that I'm passing in. And then I give that name the same parameter name right here. And then I use that right here. So if we come back up here and look at the comments, you can see user is a static portion of that. This name area is going to be the dynamic portion of it. And then greet is going to be the static part. So this could be user Alvin greet. It could be user Fred greet, or any other name right here is the way that code works. The important part is that this is a protected route, but a really interesting thing is you cannot tell that by looking at this code right here. There's nothing in this code that would let you know that this route is protected, other than perhaps that variable name that I gave it right there. So this is where we start to get into middleware. And one way I like to do this is you can combine public routes, and that's what I'm doing right here, is I'm creating this new variable called public routes. And I do that by combining the health route and the version route. And those were the two up here, health and version right there. Those are the two public routes. And then you can also have a set of authenticated routes. And that's what I have here is I start with my protected routes, any routes that I have defined up here. And I say, take those protected routes and to those, add this middleware function. If you remember from several videos ago, this @ symbol is what says you're about to see some middleware. And then this basic auth is this middleware function that comes with ZIO HTTP. And you can see a signature there. So all you have to do is pass the username and password that you're looking for. So this is a way you could take as many protected routes as you have up here as you want and just say, hey, I want to add authentication middleware to all of these routes right here. And once you have your public routes and then your authenticated routes, what you can do is combine those into all routes. And that's what I do here is I combine my authenticated routes and my public routes. And then down here in the run value, I just say server.serve all of these routes right there, and then run those with the default server. So as I mentioned, I think this can be a good way of having an application where you have a combination of public routes and authenticated routes, and you can just use this kind of formula that I show in this area to create those and then serve them right there. So that is our application. This one is in package HTTP 112C. It is called basicAuth middleware. And now I can make sure that's what I have running over here. Right there, I do. We have that. So let's go ahead and run that. All right, now that we have that running, we can try our public route named health. And you see we get the 200 OK response. That's text plain. And then we'll try version, which is also an unprotected route or a public route. We get a similar response here, and that's the version right there that we have here. And then the next one is going to be our protected route, which is the user Alvin greet one. And that will be here. So We can start that without, oh, I suppose we could start it with the authentication first. So let's go ahead and use the authentication. And you see that there. And when I take that authentication away, we should see the error message that we saw in previous videos. And when I add the -I or -V options there, I'll add -V just to give us a lot of information right there. And you can see I'm calling get user Alvin greet like that. And then I get the 401 unauthorized, which is exactly what I wanted. And then in this case, this part here looks a little bit different than it looked before, and that's because I did not try to customize that message in any way. So that is the default message that we get out of this basic auth function right there, is this message that I have highlighted right here. So to me, this is a really nice example of middleware, and a really good place where middleware comes into play in your ZIO HTTP applications. So if you recall from several videos ago, possibly the first video in this series, I mentioned middleware. So if we come back to this diagram, now we can see more of what's going on here. So if you'll recall, down in this window here, I had our curl commands. So any of these curl commands could be a client over here, and they're sending in a request. So if you think of this one right here, notice that I'm not passing in the username and password. So with curl, I'm sending in a request. It's hitting this basicAuth middleware right here, this request is. And because I'm not providing any login credentials with the curl command that I'm sending here, or with this get request that I'm sending, the middleware right here is going to reject my request and send back a response. And with the -V option, you could see what that response is in this line and this line right here. Now, conversely, if I scroll up to a command that worked here, where I passed in the username and password correctly to this URL, you saw that we got the full result here. So what happens in this curl command is it makes the request, it hits the middleware says I need basic authentication, and that authentication is included with my request right here. So then the middleware says, oh, okay, I'll go ahead and send your request back to the rest of your custom code, your routes back over here. And you'll find this route handler in there. This path up here, or this route, is what matches this route right here. So that's why this gets matched right here by our custom code. And that's over here. And then our response comes back out, and it goes back to the curl client, or in this case, the console right here. So that's what happens in the success case. Okay, so that's how the basicAuth middleware that comes with ZIO HTTP works with a little application like this one. And again, if you want to test this one yourself, this one is in the package HTTP 112C, and the name of this object is basicAuth middleware. And feel free to test this code and modify it and work with it however you want to until you really understand how the basicAuth middleware works. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope this has been helpful.